Introducing the perfect companion to your morning listening routine. AG1's clinically backed formula is now flavor-packed with 3 new delicious flavors: tropical, berry, and citrus. Start the day on a high note with probiotics that taste like the tropics. Mix it up with micronutrients that taste like berry or citrus. And take it all the way back with the classic, AG1 Original, with notes of pineapple and vanilla. Do your health a flavor, or 4, with AG1 Next Gen, the daily health drink. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
So I think it was a bit of a shock for some people. I think some people thought it was a bit nutty.
Welcome to another new episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we dig a little deeper into the pivotal moments that shaped the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. We're back after a bit of a summer break, and I couldn't be more excited to kick off this new season with none other than the legendary Lora Logic. Now, the word legend gets thrown around a lot these days, but in Lora's case, it truly fits. From helping create the chaotic brilliance of X-Ray Spex with her unmistakable saxophone, to striking out on her own with essential logic, to stepping away from the scene entirely, her story is as unconventional and captivating as her sound. Lora is one of those rare artists who didn't just play punk, she helped reshape it from the inside out. And today, she shares with us a deeply personal turning point, a near-death experience that changed the course of her life.
Yeah, I guess my pivotal moments would be the near-death experiences. I had a couple of very dramatic near-death experiences in my life. The first being pretty much signaled the end of a chapter in my younger years. I'd been in X-Ray Spex. I joined X-Ray Spex when I was 15, got kicked out for my own band. So I was managing, doing Essential Logic, living in squats for about 3.5 years. And one day I was in some Rastas squat in Brixton. I used to smoke every day, smoke dope every day. It was just part of my life. I didn't know anybody that didn't take drugs. And then my body started to shake. There was a very strong joint going around and my body started to shake uncontrollably. And afterwards it was diagnosed I'd had a severe epileptic fit. So I was carried upstairs and put on, I just remember it so clearly, a very stark, there's practically no furniture in the squat. Do you know what a squat is? I mean, squats were just, it was amazing. There was a loophole for a certain period of time where if there was a government housing, if there was some government housing that wasn't being lived in, you could just open the door, change a lock and go and live in there. So it was just, and then they changed the law. But it was a very special facility for young artists and musicians, and there'd be whole streets of squats. So it was a little thriving community. So anyway, there I was in this Brixton, other Rastas Brixton squat, and I started to have this epileptic fit, very, very bad. I was carried upstairs to the top floor, put on a wooden bed, and I was left alone, just shaking. In the meantime, I was recording Pedigree Charm in an underground sort of down home recording studio just round the corner in Brixton. And I'd started visiting the Radha Krishna temple in Soho because I was kind of looking for a way out anyway of the life that I was living. The fact that I didn't know anybody that, didn't take drugs. And I think by nature I was a seeker. I was kind of buried for a few years. But when I was 13, and I don't know why, because I didn't grow up in a religious family. My mother was a Lutheran, Christian Lutheran from Finland, but we weren't raised in a religious way. But I used to pray to God when I was 13. And I remember I just used to lie there at night before I went to sleep. And I used to say, "Dear God, if you really do exist, please guide me on the right path." Why I said that, I don't know, because I was a very rebellious teenager. That kicked in very shortly after those prayers. So I'm not quite sure about that, but maybe something in me, maybe from a previous life. So I had that epileptic fit, and I really thought it was over there. I was over the hill at the age of 22. But I'd started visiting the Radha Krishna temple because a best friend of mine from school had moved into the temple, and she'd introduced me to the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna consciousness. And I was so attracted. And I thought one day when I finish this album, I'd just like to take a few months off and move into the community and move into the temple and just do something totally different, like night and day, completely opposite to my current lifestyle, my lifestyle at the time. It meant getting up early, chanting, no intoxication, becoming vegetarian. But the people were so happy in that temple, and my friend was so transformed. She'd been a very hardcore drug user as well, and I saw how she changed and how peaceful she'd become. So I just thought I'd like to try that. Anyway, so the fact was that I was lying there shaking. I thought I was going to leave my body, but I knew about Krishna. So I thought if there had to be a God, it would have to be Krishna, because he was very attractive. And I thought a God has to sing and a God has to dance. And I knew that Krishna played the flute. So I prayed to Krishna. I said, "Krishna, if you put me in my body, then I'll clean up my act." So that's exactly what I did. I recovered from that epileptic fit practically immediately after speaking to Krishna. So I took it as a sign at the time. I did later on. That was a pivotal moment, because it was not only a near-death experience, but I altered my lifestyle considerably after that, and I left the music scene for some time. Well, I became like a monk. I actually moved into the temple after recording Pedigree Charm. I'd already disbanded Essential Logic, but I was recording Pedigree Charm as a solo album with Philip Legg, who was the original guitarist in Essential Logic. Funnily enough, I'm working with him again now, but that's a full circle. So I moved in the temple. I cut from, not deliberately, but I found that I don't think I was very popular for what I did, like leaving the music scene. I was with Rough Trade, and I had quite a consistent relationship with Rough Trade, releasing records quite often. And we really gigged extensively as Essential Logic. We did UK tours. I did European tours with other Rough Trade bands like Red Crayola. So I think it was a bit of a shock for some people. I think some people thought it was a bit nutty. Yeah, I mean, the image of the movement has changed a lot over the decades. Most people love the Hare Krishnas now. They see them as very genuine people who provide shelter. They provide a shelter for others, underprivileged people in society. They provide, where else can you go for a free meal? A really good free meal every day if you want. They go to war-torn countries and distribute food. It's a kitchen religion. That's just one tiny aspect of it. But yeah, the image of the Hare Krishnas has definitely changed.
When Lora entered the temple, she stopped doing drugs altogether. I wanted to ask her about that transition.
It was a bit cold turkey. It was really cold turkey. Yeah, going from getting up quite late every day to waking up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to attend the first ceremony of the day in the temple room. I loved it, but my body did freak out a bit. I was so spaced out. There was definitely some withdrawal there. I was very, very spaced out. They had an introductory program which you could go on for 1 year, and I signed up for that, where you learned the basics about the lifestyle and the sort of monkish training, and you'd have classes and study and chant and learn the basics of Krishna consciousness. And I won an award at the end for being the most spaced out person they'd ever had on that. I wasn't Lora Logic at all in the temple. I was just another girl, and I loved that as well. I wasn't Lora Logic anymore, and that was great.
I was curious about how Lora's parents were feeling at the time about all of this.
I think they preferred when I was in the music scene at that time. Definitely. I mean, they were very shocked when I didn't pursue further education and joined X-Ray Spex. They really didn't like that, although they did come to the first X-Ray Spex gig at the Roxy, and they thought Polly was quite quaint and they thought she could sing. But they preferred I was in that world to cutting off my material ties. Of course, they wanted me to marry a nice lawyer or a doctor and go to university, none of which I had any intention of doing. In fact, when my mum realised I wasn't going to come home, she said, "I've got a knife here." She threatened to commit suicide. She said, "I've got a knife by my throat. I'm going to kill myself if you don't come home." So that was very heavy, a very heavy moment. And my friend in the temple, she said, "She's not going to do it. She's not going to do it." And of course, she didn't do it. But she was a bit, my mum's always been quite dramatic. She's a triple Leo. No. She much preferred me to be living in squats and not washing and not eating and all of that. She preferred that to me, to rejecting the material world and disappearing into a monk's life. Although she didn't really know anything about it in the beginning. And later on, when she came to understand what a healthy lifestyle I was following, she actually changed her attitude a lot. She became a vegetarian herself, and she realized it was actually a beneficial thing to do.
Lora was just a 15-year-old saxophone player when she saw an ad that ultimately would change her life. This was her introduction to X-Ray Spex and its lead singer, Polystyrene.
Yeah, I was 15 when I answered the ad in Melody Maker, young punks with an X wanted. Polly opened the door. She opened the door. They weren't looking for another girl. The idea is they only wanted guys. Polly was going to be, she was going to be the lead singer and the limelight, and they just wanted some backing guys. But the manager, he saw me, and he saw that I had a big tenor saxophone, which was nearly as big as me. And, I could see there was just pound signs in his eyes. He was quite a ruthless character. And he thought, these two girls together, it's a good thing. And Polly could see the bright side of it as well in the beginning. Yeah. So I joined in the autumn of 76. And then I think I was kicked out in sort of late spring, 77, or maybe early summer, yeah, about maybe June, July. I was kicked out because as the manager, predicted, I was starting to get attention, as much attention as Polly, and sometimes more. And then there was one review in a newspaper called Sounds, which said, Lora Logic is X-Ray Spex and she is stealing the show. And I mean, I wasn't. Nobody could upstage polystyrene. I'll tell you that now. So, but we were great together. We were a dynamic duo. You know, I was very different from her and she was very different from me. But I personally think, you know, if she could have seen things differently, well, that's another story. If and but, yeah. Yeah, she just, you know, the green-eyed monster kicked in and she became very insecure. And she said to, there was this review by Jane Suck, said, Lora Logic is X-Ray Spex. And it freaked her out totally. It deranged, it really disturbed her. So she said to the manager, Laura has to go. And he didn't care. He was quite, he just, anything for the sake of keeping the band together, because X-Ray Spex had such a quick rise. It just rose very, very quickly. It was great chemistry. It was great songs. And it all happened very, very quickly. So he just wanted to get another backup male in the background. But the backup male took all of my licks, took all of my sax parts, and just played those. Yeah. Which then appeared on the album, slightly modified. Yeah. And I wasn't even given a credit for at all. Nothing. Yeah. So I was very burnt out, very upset and hurt when I was kicked out. The last phone call I had was that Polly was thinking I was a black witch. I was cursing evil spells on her, and I had to go. But the fact is that nobody really realized that, you know, her earlier dysfunctionalities kicked in at that time, her mental instabilities. In those days, they called it schizophrenia. I think then later they called it bipolar disorder. That's what they call it more now. So that really kicked in at that point. So that was probably a contributing factor as well.
After she left the band, Lora went to art school and then went on to form her own band, Essential Logic.
So yeah, I was very jaded with the music business as I saw it. I went to art school because I had to do something. I was still in the sixth form, the last class in school, and I had to do something. And the only thing I ever really enjoyed doing at school was just locking myself up in the art room and painting. And the pieces of work that I had done were good enough to get me into an art school. So I went to art school. And when I was there was a chap called Jeff Mann, and he used to wait for me outside the art school at lunchtimes, and he used to say, my father has a record label. It was an independent record label called Cells, and I think you were the best thing about X-Ray Spex, and I think you should go to my father's studio and record something. And I got my nerves in the beginning because I thought, no, I don't want to make any music. I'm not interested. And besides which, I don't have any songs. I've never written a song in my life. I don't sing. I'm just a saxophone player. So this happened 2 or 3 times, 4 times. And then he said, well, just go home and write one. So I thought, art school was actually getting a wee bit tedious at that point. I had one tutor who was never there. He was having a nervous breakdown. It was like ghost town. Everyone was just snorting up cocaine in their lunch times, and it was kind of like a typical London art school. I was not learning anything. I thought maybe I could have gone into photography. I like taking photos. So that wasn't working out. So I thought, all right. I went home, wrote a song. That was Aerosol Burns, and went to the studio. Had 2 hours in this really nice studio, and that was it. That was the birth of Essential Logic. That was that one record, and then Jeff Mann thought it was so amazing. He said, I'm going to take this to Rough Trade Records, who I'd never heard of. I'm going to take this to Rough Trade Records and play it to Jeff Travis. So he took it to Jeff Travis, who thought it was incredible. I didn't understand what all the fuss was about. He thought it was incredible. So he said, right, we're going to distribute this. We're going to put this out on Rough Trade. And they did. And then he said, when's the album? Where's the album? So I said, I haven't got a band. So then I thought, all right, he wants an album, so let me form a band. So I put some adverts in the Melody Maker and Sounds, and I auditioned about 100 musicians, and I formed a band. I just copied what had happened to me in X-Ray Spex. They'd put adverts in the paper. It was the only way of doing it then, really. Yes, that's how we did it.
Years later, Lora reunited with Polly at the Temple of all places.
Somebody came up to me at Soho Street Temple and said, Did you know polystyrene is visiting now at lunchtimes and listening to the Bhagavad Gita class and having lunch here? My heart sank. I literally took an oath. I never wanted to see her face again. And anyway, somehow or another, I bumped into her one day. It's only a small temple, the Radha Krishna temple in Soho, and I bumped into her, and she was all smiley, and she changed. She'd been through a lot herself by then, and she changed, and all was forgiven. We became loving God sisters as much as we could. Well, she ended up moving into the temple shortly after she had her child, Celeste. So that would have been about 1982 or 1982. And then we both shifted to another temple community in Worcestershire, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a massive country estate. It was really beautiful, with cows and a large community of Krishna followers. And she actually moved into the temple at that point with her very young baby, Celeste. And I used to help look after Celeste because she was never stable for very long. And I think she was very lucky at that point with a young baby to have that community support, that female support from quite a few other ladies, other women there. And she was that's where we recorded a song there, actually. We formed a band called Juggernaut, and we played at Glastonbury Festival one year with this band. It was a Krishna band, and we each sang 2 songs. She sang 2 songs. I sang 2 songs, and we recorded a song called Prayer for Peace, which I actually did a version of on my last album, The Land of Kali. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but there's an amazing remix coming out in which her presence is heavily on this remix. So I'm super excited about it. It's such a beautiful song. It's been remixed. So I better not say too much about that, but that's coming out soon.
Lora had alluded to surviving multiple near-death experiences, and I was curious about the other stories she might have.
Childbirth was definitely my first daughter. That childbirth was very heavy. Went on for 3 days, and I love astrology. I had my chart done by a very good Indian Vedic astrologer a long time ago, but he said your first birth will be like a near-death experience. I know so many women say it's like dying, but this went on for 3 days. The child was 3 weeks late. I thought, I'm going to do a home birth. I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to go into hospital when they call me. I'm going to have a natural birth. I'm going to sit in a pool of water and let nature do it. And nature didn't do nothing. Nature didn't do anything. So, a day and a half later, and epidurals and pushing uphill for a day, I really felt that was. But the most amazing thing about that, another pivotal moment was, I think I should have really died in that childbirth. But when my hormones completely shifted the next day, as they do after the child comes out of your body, I had to take the baby. I was kicked out of hospital straight away. I wasn't ready to go home, but they kicked me out. I went home and I had to go to the doctors with this baby. And I looked at all the people in the doctor's waiting room. It was mainly elderly people. And I don't know if I was hallucinating or what, but all the faces on all the people in the waiting room looked like babies and children. And I had this profound realization that we're all just babies and we're all just children. And as we grow up, we just get covered with all these layers. But I've never forgotten that realization. Yeah, it was so real. It was so real. I wasn't on drugs. I was completely not on drugs. But I think what it was, it's the hormones that change in your body and you become so soft. Suddenly you're full of love for this being that you have to surrender your life to and stay up all night and look after. So I think it's that your heart has to melt. So you kind of carry that over to other people.
So what's next for Lora Logic? She'll be playing the Paris Pop Fest this year on September 18th and another show at the Lexington in London on September 23rd. Coming up in the future is that remix of Prayer for Peace with polystyrene that Lora had mentioned earlier in the episode, and Lora has just released a remix by Youth of the song Mother Earth that we're pleased to present to you here. Many thanks to Lora Logic for chatting with me. We had such a great talk, and I'm so happy she shared these stories with us. And thanks to Kurt Pagan-Davis for the introduction and for helping facilitate the interview. As always, a quick reminder that you can buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s Artist, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please leave a review where you're listening. It always helps others find us. And of course, subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.